Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie tonight. The focus of our investigation is a case that has captured people's attention across the country for years. An OnlyFans star accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death. Here's the story. 26-year-old Courtney Clenney went from a social media sensation to a suspected killer. The OnlyFans star rose to fame and had some 2 million followers on Instagram, where she frequently posted pictures of the man she's now accused of murdering, her 27-year-old boyfriend, Christian Obumseli. Clenney is charged with second-degree murder after stabbing Obumseli in the couple's luxury apartment in Miami. Police body camera shows the chaotic moments afterward. Clenney covered in blood and officers trying to figure out what happened. Clenney says it was self-defense and claims he was the abuser. Many videos show some of the frequent fights the couple had leading up to Obumseli's death, including an argument in an elevator and the two yelling at each other while on a trip. Officials say their apartment building management received so many complaints about their loud fights, they were on the verge of being evicted. And now we're learning more about what arguments the prosecution and defense may make in court. This case, in part, it centers on whose story is more believable. Prosecutors and those close to the victim say it's simple, that Courtney Clenney was the one who was abusive, had a history of violence against Christian Obumseli, that it's caught on camera, caught on audio, and that he was stabbed to death in a fit of rage by this defendant. But Clenney and her defense are telling a very different story, and that story begins well before the incident. Let's watch together some clips from body camera video. It's Courtney Clenney telling police officers, and this is the day before the fatal stabbing, about a fight with Obumseli.
I feel like I am being
All right, so what do you want to say?
I want to be like, exonerated, I guess, of like anything wrong. And I want him, okay, the police are here. I want a restraining order against Christian Obumseli.
We don't issue those.
Because, no, I'm serious.
To the courts.
Can I do that? Where
you have to go to court. You have to go to downtown.
How can I make myself first? Because I know him and he would do it.
Your questions are making much of an...
I am... Right now, like, I have not always been a victim, but, like, right now, I'm a freaking victim in a situation. I'm scared to go downstairs and walk my dogs. I just walked them and I told them, you don't have a chance, and now, all of a sudden, this is all happening.
What's his name?
Christian Obumseli.
Christian?
Please, just, like, don't... Get me kicked out of my own apartment.
We just want him getting... We just want him out.
I'm scared. I'm scared of him at this point.
Take her up to the apartment. Okay. Take her up to the apartment. We're going to go in.
Would it be okay if you guys...
He has belongings here.
Would it be okay if when y'all talk to my partner?
This is video evidence that no doubt the defense is going to be using in this case, and they say it shows that Clenney was afraid for her safety not long before the deadly encounter with her boyfriend. So that leads us to the first question in our investigation. It has to do with the defense that was filed on behalf of Courtney Clenney. Does Courtney Clenney suffer from battered spouse syndrome? That's what she has alleged in her notice of intent to show a defense in this case. And here to answer that question with us, we have a panel, a great panel of attorneys here with us. We have attorney Ellis Polideveas, and criminal defense attorney Sean Kent. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to start with you, Ellis. Does Courtney Clenney, after everything that we know about some of the incidents where she was the aggressor, does she qualify for battered spouse syndrome?
First, what we know is not everything, and that is an important thing to remember. There is a lot going on in this case that we are not seeing, that the experts are seeing, and that the defense is privy to. So we're not seeing everything. But what's more, even what we are seeing, I think, does enable them to thread that argument, because we are not seeing the entirety of the fight, and I think that's important. And particularly when you're dealing with something like manipulation, we're often seeing the tail end of the fight, and usually, when somebody is emotionally manipulating someone, if they've managed to trigger them, it's easy to appear calm because they've accomplished their goal. So I think they will be able to make this argument.
Sean, can you talk about what it takes to actually claim battered spouse syndrome inside of a courtroom? Is it just if you say that that's the case, then you just put it to a jury, or are there steps like there are with an insanity plea?
That's a great question, and I'm always dubious of bringing up like a battered spouse syndrome because I always say it's not a defense, because it really isn't a defense, especially if you have a valid self-defense claim. So there's not really elements. What would end up being required is you actually need an expert. You need an expert to come in and say, I have interviewed, I have talked to Courtney, I have looked at Courtney, I have looked at her history, and based upon what we have seen, based upon police reports, based upon witness reports, she is a battered wife, battered spouse, battered girlfriend. And the weird part is that would qualify her for what? And my belief, based upon what I've seen from her statements, the problem when you have battered spouse or battered wife or battered girlfriend syndrome, you're almost saying that it's an imperfect self-defense. It's almost like what the Menendez brothers claimed back in the day. In her situation, you almost want to stay away from battered spouse syndrome because what she's saying is, I didn't overreact. I acted in self-defense because this person attacked me on that date in question, and that's what you and the jury should focus on. So that's why I'm a little weird on the battered spouse syndrome. I think she can make it, but it doesn't really give her a specific defense when she has a self-defense claim.
That's interesting that you characterize it as potentially it weakening her self-defense. And Court TV has spoken with her attorneys where they broke down whether or not this was self-defense and why it was self-defense. If we can play that, and then I want to talk about it on the other side.
The evidence is clear in this case that she was the victim of domestic violence. There is not, this has been portrayed as one-sided up until this point.
You know, the other day I heard the attorney for the family speak, and she used the words that Obumseli was a gentle soul, a kind and docile, gentle man. But the evidence really goes against that, and I don't think we've had the opportunity to really share it, but I'll just give you 3 examples. In Las Vegas, July of 2021, security was called by Courtney, and the body cam of the officer shows the security guard telling him, we overheard her on the phone saying, get your hands off me. They go up to the room and clumps of her hair are on the ground. 2022, in February, we have a audio video of the security going up to outside of the apartment where they can hear Courtney screaming, saying, you hit me in the leg. And then just a mere 2 days before what happened here, this tragedy, we know that Courtney was asking for help. She was begging the police to get her a restraining order. But more than that, and something that I think is not really shown, is in that same body cam, the employee at that building, he is heard telling the officers on the body cam, we saw Obumseli charge at her and had to get in the middle. Those are not the actions of a gentle soul, a docile man.
Ellis Polyvides, I want your take on how the attorneys should handle the mutual combat part of this. We have seen videos of the back and forth between these two. There's admissions on both sides that this was a volatile relationship where sometimes she was the aggressor, sometimes he was the aggressor. How do you square that with the battered spouse syndrome and what may be in jurors' minds about what they would traditionally think of when you think of someone who's been a battered partner?
First, in the context of a toxic relationship, you are never going to have a perfect set of facts. So that is important. Second, the way that the battered woman syndrome or intimate partner violence configures into self-defense is stating, because when you're dealing with self-defense, what you're saying is, I was in reasonable fear that my life was in danger. Now, that can manifest itself in a specific incident, but it can also be informed by a pattern and history of abuse and toxic relationship. And that is why it configures and how it configures into the self-defense claim. In other words, they are building an argument that she was in reasonable fear of her life, not just because of what he may have done on the date in question, but the entirety of their relationship and their past.
That pattern certainly complicates things, and we've seen this play out because the prosecution has put out the videos that they wanted the public to know about in this case. Here's one that a lot of people have seen, but we're going to show it again, and it's one that was released back when Courtney was arrested. This was a few months before Christian Obumseli was killed, and in the surveillance, we see them in this elevator. And it seems that Clenney was in at first, and as soon as Christian steps in, she starts hitting him. They're both hitting each other. And most people who saw this said, look, this makes it clear that he's trying to restrain her. He's trying to make sure that she doesn't hit him. But then later you kind of see him holding on to her, and it almost seems like there are some hits right there that he does. I mean, this really complicates things, Sean, for not only the defense, but in some ways the prosecution.
Well, that's why I mentioned that I'm not petrified, but that's why you got to be careful with a battered spouse syndrome when, if you look, immediately after she was arrested, her statement was, he was coming at me, he had me against the wall. I was fearful for my life, so I pulled my life and I stabbed him. She's hitting the elements of self-defense. Battered spouse syndrome in a way almost seems as though maybe I overreacted, ladies and gentlemen, but the reason I did is because of our history of violence, so I had to get him right then and there. That's why you get a little careful, and then what you're going to end up having are the prosecution and the defense both showing that both of them are potentially violent people. If I'm her, it's just like all of our past transgressions, all of our past history, all of the problems that we've gone through doesn't mean anything because on that day, that time, he came after me and I was afraid of my life. It only takes one time. Maybe I wasn't the best girlfriend. He wasn't the best boyfriend. We had our issues, but no matter what happened, that day, he came at me and I had no choice. So that's why we're careful with the battered spouse syndrome, because usually you use the battered spouse syndrome where someone says, and I like to use the Menendez example because they're like, look, were you in your fear of your life right then and there? No. We had been abused so many times, and so it was in our brain toxic. We had a feeling, so we had to attack right then, even though we weren't in fear for our lives right now. Courtney doesn't have that. Her statement from her own statement is, I thought I was going to die that day, so I had to stab him. Period. Self-defense. That's her claim. I think
no doubt
all of this other stuff hurts.
The prosecution is no doubt going to bring that up. Her statement right after in real time, not what her attorneys came up with much later. But we are going to continue to talk about this case and what else could complicate things at trial. We're going to talk about Christian's secret recordings and should they be admissible.
You know, like I was sober for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And now why am I not sober? Because I need you. But you're hindering my progress.
The tragic story of Madeline Soto.
How could this happen?
Her mother's boyfriend facing dozens of sex abuse charges before he stands trial for Madeline's murder.
Allegedly finding pornographic material on his cell phone, including Madeline.
It's getting in front of the jury all the pictures of the defendant and the little girl.
I'm pretty sure you know what some of those pictures are about.
The Stephen Stern sex abuse case. Live coverage next week following jury selection on Court TV.
Don't touch me!
What is going on? What are you gonna get this mad at me when I'm apologizing to you?
No, Christian.
And you're thinking I'm doing it on
Drop your high pitch.
Okay, I'm not doing it on purpose.
You touched all right. You know damn well the right thing to do is to tell me.
Yes, and I am so sorry.
So shut up and let me slap you, dumbass.
Oh, you're not gonna slap me.
Give me my phone.
You have your phone.
I don't have it anymore. Find it and charge it.
That is just one of the, quote, secret recordings that Christian Obumseli captured on his phone without Courtney Clenney apparently knowing. A law firm represented his family. They released all of these recordings. They believe these recordings show a pattern that Clenney had been abusing Obumseli. We're going to watch together another recording. This one has video. It's from a trip that the couple took to Aspen, Colorado back in 2022, and it is weeks before the fatal stabbing.
Anyway. You know, like I was sober for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And now why am I not sober? Because I need you. But you're hindering my progress.
You need to sit down. You need to sit
Let go of me. Let go of me.
Come on.
Let go of me.
Okay.
Come on, boy. Let go of me. Like, I can't even, like, I'll start to hit you later. Like, get the off me.
You don't want to hit me?
Christian, he saw me, and I know he's looking. I'm like, fed up with you. I'm fed up. I'm fed up with that you treat me.
Courtney,
oh, yes, I'm not mad at you.
You let Moana say some line that affected you.
I didn't let her say anything.
I didn't say
you did it.
Hey, let's go to Moana right now. Let's pull up to her.
No, I'm just gonna say her.
No, she's in the group chat. Let's put her on the phone right now.
I dare you.
Yeah, you dare me? Keep saying
you
it.
Do it.
Then stop saying it then.
Do it.
Then stop saying it then. Then stop saying it then.
Let's what? Okay, sure.
Come on.
Let me get my
Ask her. Ask her, did I touch her breast yesterday?
How instigative he is?
No, you're telling me I touched her breast yesterday when I.
You did. I didn't say you touched it.
You said I did.
You were leaning. Yo, you were dumb as. I actually don't agree with you. Actually, I'm done.
Okay.
Can you send him home?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm done.
Okay, fine.
Done. Because you're like, you're costing me money. I didn't do. He's like, got from this house because of you.
You know, it's really clear from the videos that we see in this case that this was a volatile relationship. And prosecutors want a potential jury to see and hear all of these recordings, if possible. But Clenney's defense team does not want those recordings to be coming out, and they have filed a motion to suppress them. So that gets us to the next question in our investigation. There it is. Should Christian's secret recordings that Courtney Clenney didn't know were being recorded be admissible? And we have a panel of guests we're going to talk to about that. Here they are to help us answer that question. We have civil rights attorney Lee Merritt, who once represented the family of Christian Obumseli. And we also have Brandy Churchill. She is a host of 13th Juror podcast and Crime Junkie Jury. Brandy Churchill, good to have you. Let me start with you. I want to understand more about how many recordings we're talking about, because the motion is pretty clear in terms of not wanting them in on the defense side. Are we talking about a couple? Are we talking about dozens or hundreds of recordings?
You know, the thing is, I've only been able to see from everything that I've looked at, I've only been able to see and hear, you know, a few. And we've heard that they're isolated. We've heard that it's, you know, we're getting it in, you know, the defense says that we're not getting the full picture. But everything that we've heard, it seems like these are not just isolated incidents. She's, you know, she's being recorded, and if this was just one or two, it would be one thing, but it seems to be so many. And also, it also seems to be backed up with other evidence that we have, like the text messages of her yelling, you know, or calling him racial slurs, him talking about calling her racial slurs. There's the threatening behavior, the verbal and emotional abuse. Then you have the other videos that aren't the secret videos, like the elevator video, which is, you know, also catching the same behavior. So I don't know how many of the secret ones there are, but there are so many other things that also go along with it. So I feel like it's showing that pattern of aggression, and that's not a good thing for the defense.
Lee Merritt, let's talk about this motion and the defense's goal to suppress these. And I want to actually show our viewers a portion of that motion. So first, the defense. They have this to say about these recordings that they are trying to keep out. They say the alleged victim, that's what they call Christian Obumseli, would mentally manipulate Miss Clenney when she was vulnerable, in a vulnerable state, and provoke her until he achieved the desired result, a heated argument. Once in that heated argument, he would start then his surreptitious recording to make it appear that he was the one who was the voice of reason by acting calm. Now, alternatively, prosecutors clap back in their own motion, saying that the defendant's motion contradictorily claims that the defendant did not know she was being recorded, while also claiming that the recordings would be used by Christian to, quote, gaslight her. While objective and accurate recordings of the defendant's behavior may lead her to question her own sanity or powers of reason, Christian's means of protecting himself from unfounded claims of violence is not at all manipulative, particularly in the context of domestic violence. Lee, how do you think the court is going to handle these recordings?
The court has an obligation to consider really three things. First, is the evidence relevant? Does it make something that's at issue in the case more or less likely? And I think these recordings are relevant for a couple of reasons, and I'll come back to that. The other question is it probative? or does the prejudicial effect outweigh the probative value? Probative says it gets towards a key issue in the case, in that, you know, what it gets to isn't outweighed by how bad it makes them look. Look, there are sound legal arguments why this evidence should be kept out from a defense perspective. For unfair propensity evidence, what does these prior incidents really have to do with what happened that night? Ultimately, I think the evidence comes in if they continue down the line of battered spouse syndrome, of attacking the character of the decedent. They're going to open the door ultimately at trial to all of this evidence coming in to refute the claims that they're making about Christian Obumseli.
And Leah, follow up to you. Do you think it matters what state these recordings happen in? Because it could be that it was when they were traveling, when they lived in Las Vegas, when they lived in Florida, and they're really arguing that because she didn't know about it, that in one-party states, or two-party states rather, that this should not come in because she didn't know about it.
Certainly, whether or not these recordings took place in a state that allowed for the recording of individuals, one-party states, essentially where as long as one party consents to the recording, that's the vast majority of the 50 states, then the evidence comes in. If it happens to fall into some of the states where that is not the rule, then it doesn't come in. The problem here for the defense is that there's mountains of evidence. There are recordings, there are text messages, there are hospital records from previous injuries to Christian Obumseli, and they're going to have a hard time keeping all of that evidence out.
Absolutely. We are going to continue to follow that. Lee and Brandy, stand by. Our guests are staying with us. When we come back, we are going to talk about really the most important person in this case, and that's the victim. First, the defense says he's an alleged victim, so we will be asking, is Christian Obumseli the victim or the villain? Welcome back to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie as we continue our investigation into the case against Courtney Clenney, an online celebrity who had a big following in 2022 when she fatally stabbed her boyfriend. She says in self-defense. Many questions still remain about exactly what led up to the deadly encounter and who's to blame. Here's the story. OnlyFans star Courtney Clenney is accused of killing her boyfriend, Christian Obumseli, in 2022. Clenney told investigators she stabbed Obumseli in self-defense at their apartment during an argument. Prosecutors say violent fights were common in this volatile relationship. Many of those fights have been captured on video. Some show Clenney acting violently. Some were Obumseli's secret recordings. But Clenney claims he was the abuser, often gaslighting her and causing her to react violently. In court filings, the defense said, quote, he would manipulate and abuse Courtney in private when he thought nobody was around. Clenney is charged with second-degree murder. It's also important to remember that Christian Obumseli was unarmed when this happened. I want to show you some video though, of a moment before this happened. Both Courtney Clenney and Christian Obumseli speaking with officers about a totally separate incident. This is in Las Vegas, Nevada, more than 6 months before that stabbing. And police responded trying to figure out whether Clenney threw a glass at her boyfriend during an argument about not going to dinner the night before.
More the story, like I was on the couch, like she threw the glass thing and I'm out on my face. Then I went back to bed. Like I was like, why'd you do that? Okay, I go to the bed. I understand that she was mad, you know. Right, but I wasn't doing anything. I was on the couch.
Like he was just hurting my feelings.
Okay.
And I ended up responding. Like he just got louder because my feelings were being hurt. Obviously, we're going back and forth. He was already upset with me. I was getting upset with him. We were getting loud. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna like do damage to the room or something. Not damage to each other. Like I really want to like
But why would you think
that.
Why would you think that you were going to do damage to the room?
I like throwing something, or like.
Did you throw something?
Did I?
Yeah.
No.
Did anybody throw anything?
No.
So why would you think that there is damage to the room to be made?
Because I've done that before in our house, and I.
What have you done?
Thrown a glass at him.
Did you remember throwing the glass?
No, you don't. But that sounds like me, so.
No doubt about it, this is a trial that's going to be video rich. It's going to be up to this jury to decide who they believe. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Is Christian Obumseli the victim or the villain? Let's bring back in our panel to help us break this down. Lee Merritt is with us, and a civil rights attorney who once represented the family of Christian Obumseli. And we also have Brandy Churchwell, podcaster of the 13th Juror podcast. Lee, let me start with you. You have represented so many victim families across the country, Ahmaud Arbery's family, George Floyd's family. What did you learn about Christian and his family that drew you to that case?
Well, it's a case that took place in South Florida, and there is a heavy racial element that is kind of always in the room, but we don't like to talk about it in plain terms. I became involved in this case after Mr. Obumseli's family contacted me and asked, because at the time Courtney Clenney had not even been arrested. She was held on what's called a Baker's Act, receiving mental health treatment. But she was not charged with a crime, and that's common in the American judicial system when the victim is black and the assailant is white. And so that was the first thing that caught my attention on this case.
Brandy, this is a case that got a lot of attention. Lee is talking about kind of how more and more people started to wonder why she hadn't been charged. There was a gap in time before she was charged. What have you seen in terms of your followers, the people who are reacting on social media? Do you see the majority of folks viewing Christian as the victim or the villain, and has it changed at all?
From what I've seen, I haven't seen it change at all. I think that based on extensive evidence that we have seen, he is 100% the victim here. And look, people are complex, so I know that there's no such thing as a perfect victim. We all have flaws, and you can look at any of those videos and pick out things that he did that you can say, oh, he should have done this differently, or he should have done that differently. There's no such thing as a perfect victim, but there's no evidence that we have seen that suggests that Christian is in any way the villain in this situation. And I think that even her own interview with the police afterwards, where she says, they were in a fight and she, overreacted, everything suggests that she is the aggressor in pretty much every situation that they have. And so I think that trying to kind of hijack the victim role in this situation isn't really going to work for her.
Now, speaking of interviews, not only with police, she also went on a podcast. Of course, she had her own online fame as this OnlyFans model, but she spoke to the We in Miami podcast, and she had this to say on, it was before the deadly stabbing, but she and the podcast hosts are talking about who she likes to date and what she thinks about control in a relationship.
You got like 1 million followers or something?
2 million.
Damn. You look like the type of girl that only dates like rich guys. Is that true?
No, that's not true. I only date black guys. Especially black guys. Especially black guys. Let me clarify. I only date rich black guys.
Rich black guys. There we go.
In my life, I don't like anybody to tell me what to do.
So you only want them to tell you what to do in the bedroom. Other than that, you don't want them to tell you anything.
Right. No, that's exactly it, yes.
We also know that later in that podcast, she self-describes herself as toxic. Lee Merritt, your thoughts on the characterization that's going to happen inside of this courtroom? We know there's going to be 2 very different stories told about Christian and whether or not he was the abuser, whether or not he was the aggressor. What do you think is going to be the most powerful evidence for the prosecution to combat what we know is coming from the defense?
I honestly think the case actually comes down to what happened on the day that Christian Obumseli lost his life. In the statements made by Mrs. Clenney to detectives shortly after the stabbing incident, I think will be essential. She claims that she threw the knife like a magic knife thrower across the room, and it lodged in his heart. That's very difficult to do. It's going to be very difficult to prove from the defense perspective. I think it's easier to prove that she rammed that knife into his chest with intent. And that's going to be an issue. We do have to remember, I represented the family of a black man who was killed by a white woman in Dallas, Texas. Botham Shimja was killed by Amber Geiger. And although she entered his apartment and shot him to death, she still tried to make him out to be a dark silhouette figure. And I do expect the defense to rely on that fear of blackness in general to convince the jurors that Christian was a real problem. Again, she's going to have a lot of obstacles to overcome, including her own statements from the night that Christian was killed.
Brandy, do you think this is one of those cases that would have escaped prosecution had it not been for the outcry, the advocates who paid attention to this case and started to really make a noise about it during that time that she was in a different state?
Absolutely. I think that they basically listened to what she said, kind of ignored, huge red flags. And I think that they took it for what it was in that moment, and then we're just going to let it go, which is mind-boggling because even her description of how she threw the knife, even the way she acted it out, like she's like, oh, I just kind of did it like this. It's a 6-inch blade, and it was, I think, 3 inches deep, like the injury. So you that's not just a tossing it like this from 10 feet or so across the room. None of it made sense. And I think that if there had not been this push for it, then yeah, I think that she could have just gotten away with it.
Lee Merritt, same question. Do you think that this could have escaped prosecution if there hadn't been these advocates' outcry about this case?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I've seen that over and over again, particularly out of this state attorney's office in Miami-Dade. In most of those instances, it's police officers who have not been charged or tried for the death of a citizen, and without public outcry. And so, yeah, the public plays a key role in this case, and we saw that in the timeline. And once the public got a hold of this case, and there were demands for a closer investigation, demands for the prosecutor's office to do the basic, which is to present the facts to a grand jury. That's when we saw action, and it was delayed. And I do believe without it, we wouldn't be here today.
Brandy, real quick before we have to go, what else do we know about Christian outside of his relationship with Courtney?
Well, we've heard that he was, very into athletics. He played football. He sold Bitcoin. He's, his friends and family have said that that was something that, he enjoyed doing. He was passionate about. And from every account that we've heard, everybody says he was just a really good guy. I think that his involvement with her kind of, got him into an emotional, abusive and physical, cycle. And I think it just kind of started taking away who he was. But even if you look at her interviews, when they ask her things about him, she doesn't know. She can't even answer.
Thank you so much for all of that analysis. We will see what happens with this case. National Civil Rights Attorney Lee Merritt and Brandy Churchwell, host of the 13th Juror podcast. Thank you for being with us. We're going to ask this question after this break. Why has this taken so long?
I think we should be geared for a trial or shooting for the first quarter of next year.
Bryan Kohberger accepted a plea offer.
A shocking turn of events.
Have you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Convicted killer Bryan Kohberger will learn his fate for murdering 4 Idaho college students.
He is the boogeyman.
And come face to face with the families of his victims.
I pray that we have justice.
The sentencing of Bryan Kohberger. Live coverage begins Wednesday morning, only on Court TV.
We were able to go through a first round of depositions. Most of them appeared, some of them did not. We have to complete those. There's also a second round of depositions that are going to include the lead and a lot more of the substantive witnesses, and really we just need another reset.
That's correct, Judge. Most of the depots preliminary depositions have been completed. The remaining depositions should be done rather quickly, so I would suggest perhaps a reset sometime in September or October. And I think we should be geared for a trial. I've spoken with Mr. Adelhoff. I think that both our trial schedules and Ms. Puglisi's trial schedule would prevent us from doing it this year, but we're shooting for the first quarter of next year.
That's the attorney in the case against Courtney Clenney updating the judge on how long certain tasks are going to take, when they may be ready for trial. But here's the thing, that was in July of 2023, 2 years ago, when the defense attorney says they'll be ready next year. What they mean is 2024. And here we are, 2025, still no trial date for this case. I want to play you a clip from another hearing. This was back in 2024. The judge and attorneys are discussing the latest motion to have the prosecution, according to the defense, removed from the case. It's a discussion that has caused a lot of delays here.
I would really like to, if you guys are going to move forward with the motion to recuse the state, I would like to have that motion heard before the end of the year.
We would love that, Judge. We have. Sorry, I didn't even see you. Sorry.
And Sean Abbott on behalf of the state. So we do have the depositions, the last remaining one, scheduled. As soon as that's done, I believe we might be ready to move forward on it.
At that point, then, depending on what happens or what is said by the officers, we would move to then request that the state attorney's office be deposed or specific state attorneys, and then from there, depending on that result, then we would be ready for the motion.
I want to get this done before the end of the year. Because
absolutely,
depending on what happens with it, I mean, this is the last, large outstanding thing that has to be done. So when is the deposition set for the officers?
I believe it's next week, Judge.
It is next week, Judge. They were in trial, the prosecutors, so we have been trying to coordinate. They've been responding. It's just their schedule. They were in trial, so it's why.
But not you.
Next week we're available to make it happen.
I'm going to give it a status date in 2 weeks, and you're going to give me an outline of when all these depositions are going to happen. Okay, and then maybe when we can argue that motion.
Depositions, status hearings, we've seen it over and over again in this case. That brings us to the final question in our investigation. Why has this taken so long? Is this abnormal, or is this the regular course of business for a murder case? To help us with our investigation, let's bring back in criminal defense attorneys Ellis Polyvides and Sean Kent with us. Let's talk about it, guys. Ellis, let me start with you. Is this too long? Is it being dragged out, or is this pretty normal?
So for a murder case of this size and this scope, I think it's pretty normal. There was an added wrinkle in this case, well, two, I would say, which is why it's taken this long. First, you have that battered woman syndrome, intimate violence component, which adds a lot of time because you're going into the past and you're going into the specifics of their relationship. That yields a lot more evidence than just what happened, let's say, on the date of the incident. But the second issue came 2 years after the arrest. There were the computer hacking charges that were brought against the parents. And what that revealed was that attorneys from the state's attorney's office had accessed attorney-client privileged information. That resulted in hearings which ultimately resulted in the prosecutor being removed. And now there are motions for excluding the entire Miami-Dade State's Attorney's Office. Add the procedural component to the depositions, which are allowed in Miami-Dade, and now you have the recipe for this really long trial.
Ellis, I'm glad you brought up that issue with the motion to disqualify, because we were able to obtain here at Court TV a statement from one of the defense attorneys on this, Frank Prieto. And this has to do with that motion to disqualify the prosecution. His response on what has happened is that the defense has been litigating the motion to disqualify the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office regarding the misconduct of the former lead assistant state attorney in this matter, who has now been removed from the case. Like you said, Ellis, the judge denied the motion to disqualify the entire state attorney's office earlier this month after intense litigation over this issue. The court ruled that the improper conduct of the state appeared limited to the former lead prosecutor when he improperly reviewed attorney-client and attorney work product communications. And the defense is saying that's the delay in litigating this issue that is exacerbated by, they say, the state's refusal to admit the improper conduct. The case is now positioned to move forward rapidly to get Courtney's case to trial regarding her April 3rd, 2022 actions, where The defense says this was self-defense. Sean, let me bring you back in and talk about where we are in this case, because there's not even a trial date on the record. A lot of times we will see the judge set a date and then continually require these attorneys to show cause as to why it's moving. But here, it seems like there are just so many issues, we don't even have a date on the record.
What do we say? Florida's going to Florida? That looks like what is going on. I think Ellis said it best. All of these issues, the removal, the depositions, which is very strange. We don't do that in our state in South Carolina, so allowing depositions, the judge and the different rulings, the arresting of the family. It is wild, I think, that it's taking this long, but giving the procedural history, it seems to make sense. It is wild that the judge just hasn't set a trial date. And I kind of agree with the defense attorney, the fact that their client's been sitting in jail for 3 years, but I haven't seen anywhere where they filed a speedy trial. So it seems like the defense and the prosecution are fine with this cavalcade of craziness taking this long. So it seems, again, Florida's going to Florida. Everybody's fine with it taking so long.
That's true. No speedy trial demand on the books here. Ellis, do you think there's a chance we could see a plea at any point in this case?
Based on what I've seen so far, I do not think that would be the case, particularly when there is such disagreement as to whether, as the question that you posed on the show tonight, whether the victim in this case is a villain or a victim. That whole debate is going to have to get to a trial. When there is some agreement, because sometimes when you're dealing with these intimate partner violence type cases, you will get prosecutors kind of agree, because sometimes the evidence is there that it is one-sided and it is pretty clear. And that gives you the opportunity to actually work out a plea that will work. But in this case, each side has dug in on very opposite sides of this, so they're going to have to do this in front of a jury, and it'll take as long as it needs because life is on the line, and you can do a few months when you have an entire lifetime at stake.
Absolutely. Sean, we've got this element of the battered spouse syndrome request. Now that the motion to disqualify the prosecutor has been cleared up, do you think we're going to see more on the record? We haven't seen any filings about any doctors who are going to be experts or going to be deposed or anything like that, but we know that that's likely coming.
There is no way you're not going to see it. With a case like this and with both sides firmly entrenched in their positions, this is going to be a battle of who has the best expert, whose expert is going to present best in front of the jury. They have made it clear what both sides are thinking, so you're going to start seeing filings coming fast and furious, saying whose expert says what. So there's going to be a lot of experts. There's got to be experts specifically in this case, and there's going to be experts on knife throwing, battered wife syndrome, battered spouse syndrome, self-defense. There's going to be all types of expert in this case. I think it's going to be an expert-driven case, but all that being said, it's really going to come down to how well Courtney can testify once she gets on the stand. And the problem is, she hasn't stopped. She didn't stop talking after she got arrested. All of those statements, all of these things, all of these OnlyFans comments, I think are going to come back and hurt her in the long run.
Yeah, there's so much evidence that these prosecutors will take. Ellis, how long do you think this trial is going to take if you had to give your best guess?
I think that it's going to take between 4 and 6 weeks, because they're going to be contesting each of those discrete prior instances of violence. The elevator video is going to be a big deal. They're going to say, well, this video of the elevator doesn't show the entirety of the incident. And then they're going to get into what happened before the incident. She came in crying. He followed her. They're going to show this video, for example, that we're watching now.
Ellis, thank you so much for that prediction. Ellis and Sean, thank you both for being with us. This is all the time that we have, but this case we're going to keep following. Courtney Clenney, it's a case about domestic violence, a romantic partner who faced harm at the hands of another. The question for the jury will be, who was initially harmed? Was it Courtney or was it Christian? She's innocent until proven guilty. Christian can't speak for himself inside of that courtroom, but our system of justice is set up to protect victims regardless of their size, stature, or gender. I'm Julia Jenaé. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.